All right, so you're back with us for another deep dive. And today we're going to try to get our heads around something pretty serious, something that's developing really fast on the global stage. We're talking about the rising tensions between the U.S. and Iran. It seems like it all comes down to Iran's nuclear program and, well, a very direct ultimatum from President Trump.
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Okay.
We've gathered a bunch of reports and analyses to really give you the clearest view of this whole thing.
Yeah, you sent over articles from Al Jazeera, Fox News, got some Reuters in there, and NBC News, a good mix. And these outlets, as you know, don't always see eye to eye, so it'll be interesting to see what they each emphasize.
Right, some different perspectives for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So we're not here to choose sides or start throwing out wild predictions. We want to get into these sources, really dig in and pull out the most important stuff. We want you listening to come away with a solid understanding of what's going on right now, who the main players are, and really what the potential ways forward might be, and of course those risks of things escalating. We're going to dig into the details, but try to keep it from getting too overwhelming. So okay, let's start unpacking this. I guess the most immediate trigger is President Trump's ultimatum to Iran.
Right, so back in early March 2025, President Trump sent a letter directly to the Iranian leadership. And the main point of this letter was an offer to sit down and hash out a new nuclear agreement. But here's the catch. This offer had a pretty firm deadline, just 2 months for Iran to respond.
And it wasn't just a formal letter, right? Trump also made some pretty strong public statements around the same time. Some reports actually quoted him saying, if they don't make a deal, there will be bombing. Kind of hard to miss that message. And then he also mentioned the possibility of these secondary tariffs. I mean, for those who might not know exactly what that means, those are tariffs on companies that do business with Iran, even if those companies aren't based in the U.S. It's a way to put more economic pressure on Iran.
Yeah, and you know what's really interesting is that while he's taking this tough stance, Trump also claimed that U.S. and Iranian officials are talking. At least that's how he put it. So does that mean there's some behind-the-scenes communications going on? Or maybe each side just defines negotiations differently?
Right. It's kind of a mixed message when you put it all together. So, okay, we've seen Trump's opening move. Now, what about Iran? How did they respond to this offer, which, let's be honest, came with a pretty big stick attached?
Well, it looks like, at least initially, Iran's not interested in direct negotiations under the conditions Trump has laid out. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian addressed this head-on. He said, and I quote, "We don't avoid talks. It's the breach of promises that has caused issues for us so far." He went on to say the U.S. needs to prove that they can build trust. So you can see the history here really matters.
Right, that broken promises line, that's clearly a reference back to the U.S. pulling out of the original nuclear deal, the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was that original Iran nuclear agreement back in 2018. Seems like that broken trust is a big part of how Iran is seeing this whole situation now.
Definitely shaping their perspective. But there was a glimmer of hope, though. President Pezeshkian suggested that indirect talks with the Trump administration might still be possible. And according to the reports, this would be on an injunction from Khamenei. So it seems like they're saying no to direct talks with Trump himself, but maybe communication through other channels isn't totally off the table.
Yeah, makes sense. And speaking of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, he also sent a pretty strong message, right?
Absolutely. After Eid al-Fitr prayers, Khamenei basically warned that if they commit any mischief, they will surely receive a strong reciprocal blow. You know, it's clearly directed at the U.S., emphasizing that Iran is not backing down and they're willing to retaliate if they see any aggression.
Definitely sounds like the rhetoric is heating up on both sides. We also saw a pretty strong statement from Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson, Esmail Bakai.
Oh, yeah. Bakai called Trump's threat a shocking affront to the very essence of international peace and security, and followed it up by saying, "Violence breeds violence. Peace begets peace." He added, "The U.S. can choose the course and concede to consequences." It's a pretty stark reminder that things could easily spiral out of control.
Yeah, you can see how one action could lead to another and things just keep escalating. And it wasn't just words, right? I mean, we heard that Iran actually took a formal step and delivered a warning to the Swiss embassy in Tehran. You know, Switzerland represents U.S. interests in Iran because the U.S. doesn't have its own embassy there.
Yeah, that's an important point. By going through the Swiss, Iran was sending a message directly to the U.S., and that message was basically that they're prepared to respond decisively and immediately to any threat. They're definitely not taking Trump's ultimatum lightly.
So we've talked about this immediate trigger, this back and forth. But let's go deeper into the heart of the matter, Iran's nuclear ambitions. So for those of us trying to follow along, what are the main worries from the U.S. side?
Well, the main thing the U.S. is worried about is that Iran is secretly working on a nuclear weapons program. And the fact that they're now enriching uranium to 60%, that's a big red flag. Just to put that in perspective, weapons-grade uranium is usually enriched to around 90%. So 60% is getting pretty close.
Right, and the amount of enriched uranium they have, that's also a big deal, isn't it?
Yeah. Exactly. A UN Atomic Agency report that was mentioned in a few of the articles says that Iran now has enough enriched uranium to potentially build up to 6 nuclear weapons. Now, that's based on their current enrichment level, and doesn't mean they've actually built any or that they've turned them into actual weapons.
Which brings us to the whole tricky world of intelligence assessments. It seems like there are different opinions on just how close Iran is to actually having a nuclear weapon ready to go.
Yeah, and that's a key point.
Yeah.
The U.S. intelligence community, well, at least according to Trump's director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, they assess that Iran isn't actively building a nuclear weapon right now. And they say that Supreme Leader Khamenei hasn't given the go-ahead to restart the program. He stopped back in 2003. But she did say that Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium has grown a lot.
But the European perspective, at least based on what we've read, seems a little different.
Yeah. Fox News reported that European intelligence agencies think Iran is actually moving towards testing an atomic weapon. Now, this difference could be because they define building or working towards a weapon differently. David Albright, who's a nuclear specialist, pointed out that European agencies might be using a newer definition for what counts as building a weapon of mass destruction compared to the U.S. It's like saying a house is being built when the foundation is laid, but someone else might say it's only being built when the walls are going up. They're looking at the same process, but using different points to define it. Same with these agencies. Maybe they see the same data about weapons development, but interpret those steps differently.
It's like they're speaking different languages almost when it comes to defining the stages of this process, which makes it really tough to get a clear picture of the immediate danger.
Yeah, exactly. And to really get this, we have to remember the history here. Trump's decision to pull the U.S. out of the 2015 JCPOA, that's a big part of this. He said he did it because the deal had some big problems. It didn't stop Iran from ever developing nuclear weapons, and it didn't address their ballistic missiles or their support for groups the U.S. sees as terrorists. Since the U.S. left the deal and put sanctions back in place, Iran, well, they've gone beyond the limits on uranium enrichment that were set by the JCPOA. And through all this, Iran has always said that its nuclear program is only for peaceful uses, for energy.
That's their official line, yeah.
Yeah. But the level of enrichment they've achieved and how much material they have, that's what's making Western powers nervous.
Right, you can understand that. Okay, so we've got Trump giving ultimatums, Iran pushing back with some strong words, and that formal warning, and just this fundamental disagreement over what Iran's nuclear program is really all about with these different interpretations of intelligence. Let's focus in a bit more on the main players involved. We've already talked about Trump and Khamenei, but who else should we really be paying attention to?
Well, like we said before, Iranian President Pezeshkian seems open to indirect talks, but not direct ones with Trump. That's something to watch.
Yeah.
And his point about the need for trust, that really shows what Iran sees as essential for any real engagement going forward. Then there's Bagay, the foreign ministry spokesperson. His really strong pushback against Trump's threats, well, that reflects Iran's official diplomatic stance. It's a sign they're not going to back down under pressure.
And on the military side, we also heard from Revolutionary Guard's aerospace commander, Amirali Hajizadeh. His warnings about the U.S. military being in the region, those were pretty serious.
Yeah, definitely. He talked about U.S. forces being in a glass house. And then they released that footage of the missile city. They're showing that they have serious military power, and they're ready to use it if they're attacked.
Yeah.
These aren't just offhand comments. They're a big part of this whole risk assessment.
Right. Not to be taken lightly. There was some analysis from folks like Jason Brodsky and Alireza Nader. Anything in particular from their insights that stuck out to you?
Well, Jason Brodsky from United Against Nuclear Iran, he thinks that Iran might be going for indirect talks as a way to avoid giving Trump a reason to attack. Interesting idea. He also said that some Iranian officials might see the disagreements within Trump's national security team, and they might try to talk to the people they think would be more open to a tweaked version of the JCPOA, the original deal. Then you've got Alireza Nader. He emphasized how badly Iran needs economic relief. He thinks that even though the supreme leader is talking tough, this economic pressure is something the U.S. could use to its advantage. So maybe the U.S. strategy is to just wait it out, wait for the economic strain to force Iran to make a move no matter what's happening diplomatically. It's a thought.
Right, a long game. And we can't forget Tulsi Gabbard's assessment as Director of National Intelligence. It carries a lot of weight, even if it's different from the European view. And then David Albright's point about how the U.S. and Europe might define WMD construction differently really shows how uncertain things are when you're relying on intelligence.
All these different viewpoints, they really show how complex this is. It's not just about military stuff and nukes. You've got diplomacy, internal Iranian politics, economic factors, even different ways of understanding the same intelligence.
It's like a tangled web. So with all this in mind, what do you see as the biggest risks? I mean, it seems like there are a few ways this could blow up.
Absolutely. The most obvious and immediate risk is a direct U.S. military strike. Trump's talked about bombing pretty openly, and Iran's been super clear. They've said repeatedly that they'll respond with a strong blow and that they'll respond immediately. So if the U.S. does attack, Iran is going to hit back. And that could mean targeting U.S. forces in the area, maybe even Israel, especially with the history there.
And the nuclear program itself seems like that could be a flashpoint for things to get even worse.
Totally. If the talks completely fall apart and tensions keep going up, Iran might just say, forget it, and ramp up their uranium enrichment even more. That would get them even closer to weapons-grade material. Of course, that would make the U.S. and its allies react even more strongly. It could be a really dangerous cycle. And beyond that, there's also the risk of conflicts starting indirectly and just making the whole region unstable. Iran has these proxy groups all over the Middle East. So if there's direct conflict, it could spill over into other countries, and that would just make things even messier.
So even the option that sounds less aggressive, those indirect talks, it seems like those come with risks too in this environment.
Right. The U.S. and Iran don't trust each other at all. So even indirect communication could easily break down. Misunderstandings, misinterpretations, or maybe one side thinks the other isn't being sincere. And it's even more complicated because Iran seems to prefer these indirect channels, but Trump wants direct talks. That's a recipe for miscommunication.
Now, before we finish up, there was that separate issue that Al Jazeera brought up, the whole signal chat scandal in the White House. Does that tie into all this?
Well, it came up around the same time, but it seems like the White House is dealing with that separately. From what I understand, it's about claims that some high-ranking officials were using this encrypted messaging app called Signal for sharing sensitive military info. A spokesperson said they consider the matter closed, but they haven't taken any public action. So it doesn't look like it's directly affecting the Iran situation right now. But it makes you think, right? Could an internal issue like this distract the U.S. administration or maybe even affect their credibility on the world stage during a time when things are already so tense?
Right. An interesting point. Okay, so to sum up this deep dive, what you listening need to know is that things are really tense right now. There's this big deadline looming. The U.S. and Iran can't seem to agree on a way forward, and there's a very real chance that this could all escalate in a big way.
Exactly. And it leaves us with a question for you to ponder. Considering what we know about Iran's nuclear program and how much they need economic relief, what are the most likely scenarios for the next few weeks and months? And maybe even more importantly, what might happen that no one's expecting? Think about all the different things we've heard. The tough talk, the little hints that maybe there's some room for diplomacy, the different assessments of the threat. All those things could shape what happens next.
Definitely a situation to watch closely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.